Since I was a kid, I loved punk music. And so I was a fan of the Sex Pistols. And when I was really young, like I was 13 maybe, I used to trade mixtapes in school. You'll give me a list of, music you wanted to hear, and I will come back next day with a mixtape way before the internet. The only way of discovering music was like if somebody had access to the records. A lot of the music that I liked was UK music. This is probably early 90s. At that time, there was like the perfect mix of hip hop and jazz in a more like abstract way. Portisheads and Tricky and Howie B. And so I discovered this thing called jungle music. And it just blew me away because it was like music from the future. It turns out that me and a bunch of friends, we were the first people in Mexico who actually made or produced this music. And obviously I thought I need to travel to London and discover this thing for real. So I didn't stop until I got booked to a festival that was basically a tour in Europe. So I got myself shipped to play in Germany, in Berlin, made it my mission to come to London and discover, obviously, the music that the city had to offer, but also to feel like I arrived home, even though I've never been to London before. And I just decided to look for a different path in a different place.
So he had already been living here, and in the in-between of him coming and going, we met, and we sort of like dated long distance before social media was a thing, before there was like WhatsApp and all of that. So that was tough. I think it had to do with my family moving when I was a kid. I never thought that I was gonna stay in Tijuana. Like I always had this idea of moving abroad. Like I did grow up, and especially like in uni and high school, hip hop, drum and bass. Like I remember the first times that friends and I discovered BBC One Extra. I'm like, what? But even when I was a kid, like this is really silly, but I know that some people will relate. Watching Disney films, Mary Poppins, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, yeah, the Beatles, my parents loved the Beatles, so I had this idea of like how cool the UK was. And one time when my family was returning to Tijuana from visiting in Mexico, we were getting our luggage, and there was this really cool hippie girl like getting all her stuff, and like she looked really hippie, and I was like, Mom, look at the girls. And my mom back then was like, go and say hi, and I asked her for her address so that you can be pen pals. And I got the courage up to do it. And she was from the UK, and she wrote down her address. London was calling. And then it just so happened that he had moved here. So while I was visiting him, I met the founder of a company here, and I had started doing some freelance work. Went back to Mexico, and they were like, when are you coming back? It's like, I don't know, when are you bringing me back? And I ended up being the first employee that they sponsored for work, and that was in 2014 when I actually moved to the UK. And at that point Smokey had moved back, so we moved back together. I can tell you that it was work, but there was a lot of stuff behind it that kind of just, I guess it was just in the cards for us to be here.